Welcome to the .Citizen podcast. I'm Chrisella Herzog.
And I'm Zachary Stickney.
On this episode, we get to hear from Valeriy Chaly, Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. I got the chance to speak with Ambassador Chaly at the 2018 Future in Review Summit, where he was speaking on election security issues and cyber attacks Ukraine has been facing for the past several years. Due to the ambassador's tight schedule, Zach was not able to join us for this interview, but he will return in the next episode of .Citizen. Before we jump into the interview with Ambassador Chaly, I wanted to give a little bit of background on what's been happening in Ukraine since about 2014 for our listeners who might not be so familiar with the country. So if you're up to speed on all of this already, feel free to jump ahead about 3 minutes where the interview with Ambassador Chaly begins. Since 2014, Ukraine has been under a sustained cyber assault that has systematically targeted almost every sector in the country: energy, transportation, finance, media, government, military, politics. The list goes on. And instead of this assault petering out over time, the intensity of the attacks has increased. In the 2 months prior to December 2017, there were 6,500 cyber attacks on 36 Ukrainian targets, according to a statement by Ukrainian President Poroshenko. Usually in these kind of cyber attacks, an attacker is not directly named because cybersecurity experts are cautious about attribution, with good reason. But Poroshenko was very clear in his statement, saying that his government's investigations pointed to the direct or indirect involvement of secret services of Russia, which have unleashed a cyber war against Ukraine. In 2014, the Ukrainian Revolution overthrew the government and forced the Kremlin-backed Viktor Yanukovych to flee the country. Shortly after, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula and invaded the eastern part of Ukraine, known as Donbas. Ever since, the two countries have been in an undeclared war. Nearly 10,000 Ukrainians have been killed, and over 2 million have become internally displaced refugees. Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 was another victim of this war. The passenger airliner was shot down by a surface-to-air missile that had been carried across the border from Russia the day the aircraft was shot down, fired from pro-Russian separatist-controlled territory in the Donbas region, and then returned to Russia. News Corp Australia later obtained a video made by these separatists that shows they assumed the aircraft was a Ukrainian military jet. Since 2015, Ukraine has seen cyber attacks take down power grids in the middle of winter, twice. Families of soldiers will receive messages saying their soldier is dead, and when the frantic family members call or message soldiers on the front line, Russian forces will then attack while the Ukrainian forces are distracted. Government's computer systems have been shut down, financial data has been erased, elections results displayed in the media have been changed. The NotPetya ransomware that spread all over the world in 2017, irreversibly encrypting any computer it infected and causing more than $10 billion in damages globally, was first targeted at Ukrainian businesses. Ukraine has become a scorched earth testing ground for Russian cyber war tactics, where Russia tests not only the limits of their technical capabilities, but also how far it can go with its actions without repercussions from the international community. And what is clear is that cyberspace is not itself the end goal, but simply another conflict arena in a new era of hybrid war. And now, .Citizen's interview with Ambassador Valeriy Chaly. Ambassador Chaly, thank you for being with me today. So I want to start out with some broad questions for you about Ukraine. Security researchers have been generally hesitant to use the language of war when talking about cyber attacks, but in your panel at the Future in Review, you were not hesitant about calling the attacks on your country part of a war. And so I would like to understand, you talked a lot about how many attacks, 6,500 attacks on your country, cyber attacks within less than a 2-month period. How are you managing and defending against some of these attacks? How's your country managing it?
Well, first of all, I can repeat that I signed a conference that Ukraine shared the approach of the United States National Cyber Strategy that was issued last month. One of its pillars counter-melding cyber influence and information operation together with like-minded partners. Ukraine support U.S. approach in the United regarded the code of conduct in cyberspace. Cyber aggression is type of war and has to be stopped by any adequate means. So that's why we consider these attacks, cyber attacks, as part warfare against Ukraine. So it comes to us in 2014 together with the Russian tanks, and but damage not less. That's from the weapons of the third generation war. And this attack, you are right, it's a complicated attack and very intensive. I can give you more examples from that time about attack on our election commission during the election 2014, on our grids, now our financial system, banks, transportation system. One of the big example is December 23, 2015, with the help of the Trojan Black Energy 3, which was previously used by Russian hackers. About 30 stations of regional energy distributor Prekarpatable Energo, it's our western part distributor, were disconnected. More than 200,000 people, inhabitants of this region, remain in the middle of winter without electricity. And can you imagine, it's also we have the system for hospitals, for example, but not for the inhabitants, and that's real is an injury for their health. And another example, February 14, 2017, massive cyber attack was recorded, which was carried out by sending Trojan software RAZI to electronic mailboxes of employers of state and commercial organization of Ukraine. But the most damaging attack was on June 27, 2017. Ukrainian state and commercial sector experienced one of the most massive and harmful cyber attacks by the file encryption virus NotPetya. Its victims were the information and telecommunication systems, airport, our energy company, many banks, mass media, TV channels, gas stations, and many other companies. So 85% of all computers on the attack of this virus was in Ukraine. And it was a great test for us. We be better prepared for that, and in real terms was not such a damage that's awaiting those who make this attack. But we understand from 2015 how seriously that for the country, how it can make a damage, and how it can be connected. It's another issue. How connected in the with attack of the military forces of the neighboring country. So that's another thing. So we consider that once again it's a warfare, not just information activity or cyber attack, but it's a part of the war.
So I want to follow up. You talked about the NotPetya virus. Something that was interesting about that in comparison to previous viruses such as Stuxnet, Stuxnet was very targeted. Even though it ended up spreading to computers all around the world, it only affected Iranian nuclear facilities. But NotPetya, it was targeted at your country's infrastructure, but it ended up affecting everything. So what is your perspective on why Russia is behaving this way, and or whoever targeted your country with this, and why are they targeting Ukraine specifically?
That's a good part of this question. Why targeting Ukraine? Because Russia used like a polygon testing of the new sophisticated weapons, including cyber weapons.
Great. So you mentioned today on your panel that the primary source of information for many Russians and Ukrainians is television, and for Americans, increasingly it's social media. So these are the avenues where propaganda becomes targeted. What is the plan for the Ukrainian government to push back against this propaganda, and what can the rest of the world learn from it?
To be better prepared, we must do many things at the same time. First of all, change our legislation for regulation of the who could be ownership of our TV channels and media resources, which percentage not make a threat for security. After that, also important to understand how response for this cases like that when Ukrainian citizen, a businessman, use Russia as a source of money for buying media resources. So it's not prohibited about our legislation, but in fact we see this Russian propaganda disseminated in Ukrainian media sphere. The second pillar of this, very important, is just have more trust to journalists and experts and be sure this is not involved in this warfare. This is a very complicated issue because Ukraine free country and free access. Now we have free visa-free regime with 90 plus countries in the world. So, and by the way, despite of war, Russians have free access to Ukraine. Russian citizens, not those who are prohibited to come because they are be recognized as criminal cases or participate in such type of attacks. But most of the people come easily to Ukraine, and that's another problem. Many Russians works like journalists, experts, and during election processes, obviously, this play a special role during election. The third thing is coordination system on the state level. To immediate response on the facts that interfere in our internal affairs. And it's also not easy because it takes time for courts. Can you imagine if something happened after that? This courts taking decision can take 1 hour, 1 year and more. But it's happened. Everything happened. So, so-called active measures in place, and it's very difficult. Waiting for something. So that's another problem. And also, very important thing and very important problem for us now. That's from one side, Russia still has access to our inhabitants or citizens with media resources. By the way, in the United States the same. Russia Today broadcasts in the United States freely. But we banned some Russian social networks like VKontakte and Odnoklassniki because they use these social networks, by the way, not less popular in Russia and Ukraine before as Facebook. In the United States, you discuss mostly Facebook and other social networks, but in Russia, it's VKontakte and Odnoklassniki. So they use it for the disseminate illegal software, not licensed software, and viruses. So it's a technical thing, not technical, but it's how to secure our dissemination information. So we also works on that. Many things we have to do in the same time, and even we will be successful 99%, because 100% is very difficult to achieve. Even in that case, everything depends of the level of this attack, because you are right, it's much easy and cheaper make offensive in information than defense, and that's a problem.
So you mentioned that a number of international organizations are working with the Ukrainian government to bolster your infrastructure, your cyber defense, including the U.S. Department of State and the Department of Defense. But you also mentioned that you're building an international platform for public-private partnerships, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
It's my idea and my willing to have this platform, but what we do here in the United States, we try to connect United States centers and university with Ukrainian counterparts, just create a research platform, and including companies. It's one way. International, because my idea, we have to connect our friends from France This works now with Ukrainian government and Japan. So just exchange information and experience in this field. So it could be international platform, not yet.
Not yet.
Now it seems like a bilateral with the United States. And in the future, I believe we will have the networking of the group of experts around the globe on this cyber attack response. What we are doing now in the bilateral, we want to bring the group of American experts to Ukraine and sitting together with Ukrainian experts and to make this roadmap of plan for the very next months, how to prevent or response to attack an election process. This will plan for the end of March in Ukraine, presidential election. So, and also continue works on secure our dissemination information and critical infrastructure system. So that's our main goals for this exchange and this platform. When we create that, I believe probably we now have experience of different countries, but I think why is it public-private partnership? Because very important immediate response. Immediate response could be only if our, for example, Facebook or some other social networks be in the same boat together with the states, with intelligence and others. So without this, it's impossible to respond immediately. This idea. And instead of that, also state should create the conditions for these media or social networks be doing well, in the same time be secure. So that's a common goal for everybody. But what's important to understand, even we create the 100% efficient system, it can prevent somebody for using fake information, fake news. So it could be red line for politicians, for state officials, crossing this red line. So if you give the facts, it should be 100% truth, not lie. It's difficult to achieve, but if you have the 100% lie, as we faced from Russia in some cases. I give you example. Russia common every time we have civil war in Ukraine. Knowing absolutely that they keep 700 tanks in our territory, and everybody can imagine it can be buy in the shops, so it can bring from tanks that's not used by Ukraine army. So that's why if that type of lie, it's very difficult to prevent that of using new technology. So it should be the message unanimously sending from all the international community for those countries who try to broke this world of democracy, freedom, and security and secure world, to clear message that your damage that they make to us will have the adequate response from us. So only in that case it could be better situation. If not, if you allow anybody, any state, any non-governmental actor using this cyber attack as a part of warfare, so it will continue forever. So now it's a combination of new technologies, a combination of the common approach of the states and societies. That's the only way how we can prevail in this war.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for your question.
If you enjoyed this episode of .Citizen, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You can find us anywhere that podcasts are available: Google, Stitcher, iTunes, and so forth. And if you don't listen to a podcast on one of those platforms, you can also find us online at whitehatmag.com/podcasts. That's plural, podcast with an S. You can also follow us at .citizenpod on Twitter, and be sure to send us your reactions to podcasts as well as suggestions for future episodes.